Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Among the great freedoms of human life is the freedom of thought. No matter what oppressive measures we might face, our thoughts are still our own. We can think to our heart's content about whatever we want, and nobody can do a thing to stop us. This freedom can be very reassuring at times, such as when we dwell on what we really think about somebody else, without that other person having the vaguest idea about what we are up to. We may believe that we have freedom of speech, and to a great degree we do, but we all know that we are deluding ourselves to some extent. Whether it be actual suppression of speech by some authority or the ubiquitous presence of social pressure to prevent us from saying what we really wish to say, our speech is not truly free. Certainly, we cannot claim to have freedom in our actions, even though we do possess a great deal more of this than people did at any point in the past. It is probably a good thing that we are restricted in this regard, since if we would have it, so would everybody else, and who knows what sort of anarchy would rule our lives. But when it comes to thought, we are entirely on our own. We can think the most creative or destructive or loving or vengeful thoughts that we wish, and nobody can stop us. We may even feel like a god when we do this, for that, in a sense, is precisely what we are within the universe of our own mind. We can create anything we wish and have it do whatever we choose. We can dominate that world with a power that a superhero could only dream of. In fact, if we really want to see how free our thoughts are, we need only reflect back on our dreams. Those free-for-all experiences of thought are the mind just doing its thing with no restrictions whatsoever, even from itself. Little children thrive on such freedom. They can pretend to be whatever they want and imagine anything their little hearts desire. They are unchained by the years of suppression of thought that adults have undergone. They are like the proverbial blank slates who can produce anything with the whoosh of that magic wand known as the mind. They are unburdened by any consequences or bad memories. They just soar with the moment and don't worry about where it might take them. When did we first discover this amazing power? Was it during the unrecorded ages in the caves or out on the savannah? Or was it in more recent times when human beings learned that the products of their thoughts could change their lives in ways that animals couldn't even envy? We don't know when we gained this divine power, but we do know that we have it and are certainly not looking to relinquish it. The amazing thing about this situation is that we are doing just that with the inevitable sacrificing of our independence of thought to the gadgets we carry around with us everywhere. Everybody knows this already. It is no longer a warning to the unwary. We all sense it all the time, even when we're in the midst of doing it. But we cannot stop, and we all know that one day we might wake up and discover that our thoughts are no longer under our own control. We will have bequeathed that power to some digital gadget and be none the wiser. But this is nothing particularly new. For ages, wisdom of all sorts has cautioned us against unrestricted use of the mind. Thoughts of anger and hatred or jealousy or pride could lead us down a road of bitterness and depression. Wisdom literature of all kinds issued these warnings, and they became the ancestors of many modern forms of psychology. The classic among this genre, of course, is the Bible. There are so many examples of biblical advice to control the thoughts that there is no reason to quote samples. This is one of the primary messages of the Bible, that unrestrained thoughts lead to unrestrained lives. It is the essential task of the human being to learn to control them and to channel them in the right direction. This week's Parsha is called Shelach, which means send. The title refers to the main subject of the Parsha, the infamous incident of the Spies. This incident came about when the Israelites were on the cusp of entering the Promised Land by the direct route out of the Sinai Desert. Through some sort of cross-communication between the Israelite people and Moshe on the one hand, and God and Moshe on the other hand, Moshe was convinced that it was a good idea to send out men to spy out the conditions of the land they would be entering and conquering. There does not seem to have been any major opposition to this idea, as it made sense then, and it still makes sense now. It is only with the benefit of hindsight that we understand what a colossal mistake it was. The spies went out from the south and traveled through an undisclosed portion of the land. We only read that they did go to the town of Hebron, a long day's journey south of Jerusalem. They saw what they expected, and they saw what they wished to see. When they returned, they brought back a report that was both glowing and pessimistic. The land was as good as advertised, with abundant fruit which promised rich life. But it also had its share of inhabitants who wouldn't give it up without a fight. When word of this came back to the people, they sensed that this would not be a walk in the park. Consequently, they rebelled, complaining once again that they should have stayed in Egypt. They wanted to appoint a new leader, since Moshe was obviously leading them down a dead end. When this rebellion emerged in full light, God had had enough. This was a catastrophe on the level of the golden calf. This was a rejection of the very promise upon which the entire enterprise of the Exodus was based. If they couldn't trust in God to get them through the rough times, they didn't deserve any divine protection. God condemned them to die in the wilderness. They would go down in infamy as the lost generation, those who could have made it to the promised land but didn't. Moshe pleaded with God to forgive them. God relented a bit, but not entirely. They were condemned to die in the wilderness, but their children, who had never voiced these pessimistic thoughts, would be allowed to fulfill the promise. The older generation would have to spend the next 40 years wandering around the desert, hovering on the edges of ancient Canaan, but never quite making it in. The 40 years corresponded to the 40 days during which the spies journeyed through the land. It was a fitting punishment for a failure of such proportions. After the spies incident, the parsha returns to more mundane things, such as various offerings and the like. It ends with a short incident of a person who violated the Shabbat by gathering sticks. Following this, there is a paragraph that doesn't seem to fit into any of this. It deals with the ritual strings that are supposed to hang from the corners of certain garments the Israelites would wear. These strings are called Tzitzit. Biblical and Jewish tradition have long established that there are 4 of these strings in each corner, which when doubled over and tied make a total of 8 threads hanging down the 4 corners of the garment. Only males wear such garments, and they are worn by observant Jews until today. Among these strings is one that is to be dyed with a kind of blue dye, which stands out among the others, which are white wool. This dye is the color of the sky, perhaps at twilight, or even darker. For many centuries, Jews believed that they had lost the specific source of the blue dye, and they wore the garments with the white tzitzit, but no blue string. The color of this dye is called techelet in Hebrew. Many Jews today believe that the ancient source has been rediscovered. It is a type of water snail that lives along the eastern Mediterranean coasts. Thousands of Jews today now have this techelet on their tzitzit, bringing this ancient tradition back to life. The Torah states that there is a reason for all of this. Either the blue thread or the tzitzit as a whole are there so that, quote, you shall see it and remember all of the commandments of Hashem and do them, and not wander after your hearts and your eyes, which you are prone to stray after, so that you remember to do all of my commandments and you will be holy to your God. This is about as clear as it gets when it comes to the Torah describing a reason for a commandment. Usually they are left a bit vague. But this one, as strange as the commandment itself is, has a fairly clear explanation. The only question on it is, how does it work? How does having these strings hanging from some 4-cornered garments, perhaps with this one string dyed blue among them, help anybody remember all the other commandments? How does it prevent anybody from straying after their random thoughts or their eyes? How does it make anybody holy? There are no solid answers to these questions. The primary approach is that having these strings on all the time, and in particular this blue one which sticks out, a person has a potentially perpetual reminder of what his main task in life is. It is to remember those commandments and to do them. This can only be accomplished if the mind is trained with a certain kind of internal discipline. It cannot simply do whatever it wishes. Letting the heart and the eyes stray wherever they wish is a recipe for an undisciplined mind. It is only with those restrictions that the mind can have any hope of maintaining the fortitude to stay up to the task at hand. This is all known in modern language as presence of mind. That term, which we throw about without really thinking too much, means that the mind is there where it is supposed to be and not somewhere else. This is a state that we are all familiar with, but we drift out of so easily that we consider the spaced out state to be the norm. The purpose of the tzitzit is to counteract the tendency to space out. Whether it works or not is dependent upon the person wearing the garment. This perhaps is the Bible's answer to the age-old problem of maintaining presence of mind. There is nothing high-tech about it, and it needs no batteries. It just works if we allow it to work. It's all a matter of recognizing that thoughts are under our control only if we control them. Shabbat Shalom.